Welcome to Your Family's Health. This is Joan Buckley from the Department of Nursing here at Nassau Community College. Your Family's Health is a program that focuses on healthcare issues and resources available to you here in Nassau County. On the show, we speak to experts from around the country, and we want to keep you up to date on all the current healthcare issues and trends. But today's a little different. Today, we're going to be speaking to James Green. He is the producer of the public service programming right here at 90.3 WHPC. And we're going to talk about radio and its relationship to your family's health. So if you want to know more about how to stay healthy in Nassau County, stay tuned for the next half hour to the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. And welcome to the show, James Green.
It's great to be here. I'm never on this side of the microphone.
I know. This is really fun, right?
Behind the scenes.
So listen, people that know you they know you're here, but most people don't. And I think it's really important that we let you introduce yourself and your relationship on a timeline, because you've been here probably longer than anybody I know. And who are you, James Green?
Well, actually, I got my start in radio in 1969 on a radio station called WGBB. I was looking, there were no internships, Joan, in those days. Nothing. So I was driving home one night from Long Island, stating my wife-to-be at the time, and I heard this announcement we had no internet in those days. We had no fax machines. We had no iPhones.
And what year was this?
It was 1969. It was the summer of 1969.
There you go.
And I had been sending resumes to get into a radio station just to buy coffee for the DJ. And nothing. If your father didn't know anyone back in those days, we had a WNEW Metro Media Radio back in the heyday of the 60s. If you didn't know anyone, you just couldn't break into the business. It was very difficult. So I heard this announcement for an explorers group if you were interested on a local radio station, WGBB. And I sent a letter to the guy. The name of the DJ was Dick Springfield. I came home with an old-fashioned typewriter, poured my heart out, 3 o'clock in the morning, put a stamp on it with my telephone number. Now, keep in mind, we had no voicemails in those days, so you had to be home if he called you. It just so happened a day later, he calls me, he says, "Hi, this is Dick Springfield," one of those big radio voices.
Yeah.
And he said, "I'd love to have you come down and meet me here to be in charge of the group." I didn't know what it was. So I walked in there. I never forget, the guy that was on the air was a guy called John Gardner. And the song it was coming out of the end of a song, My Back Door by Creedence Clearwater Revival. And I went in there, and the magnetism I had when I saw a radio station for the first time. I mean, I was on my closed circuit radio station, WSJU. But when I saw a radio station, I said, I just can't believe this. Well, anyway, my job was to work with Cub Scouts. With no radio,
real explorers.
And show them a little bit about radio, which I already knew. And it was some group to get some kids off the street. It lasted 4 weeks. They were throwing rocks at me, balloons, and the whole thing broke up. So what happened was Dick Springfield left, and they had a guy in there called Bob O'Tone. Bob today must be in his 80s, and he took a liking to me, and he said, "Listen, Jim, you can come in here at night after midnight when the program director is not here. You can cut all the tapes you want, make tapes, fool around in the production studio, and you could come in and get me some coffee once in a while." So I did. And my mother at the time said to me, "This is crazy. I raised you to be a Wall Street executive, not going out to a radio station at midnight." And so there it was at that station that I actually started to perfect the craft of, at that time, being on the air. It was shortly after that, I was probably about 1970 I was there. And I was there about a year, just not getting paid, going in 3 times a week, midnight to 5. I had to be out by 5 before the program director came in at 6. And so what happened when I sent out my first, what we call air check, an air check for someone that doesn't know what it is a check of a DJ's work. It could be scoped. Scope means you cut the songs out. You just have a little intro of a song. I had it for about 4 minutes. And in those days, we were using reel-to-reels. Today, we use MP3 files, but then we use reel-to-reels. And so I sent it out to a few stations, and WJJL in Niagara Falls come calling me. And they said, we'd like to hire you as the afternoon DJ. So the guy says, can you fly up here for an interview? And I did. Gave me the job right on the spot. No apartment. They were going to find me the apartment. And that became a history for me. And on July 4th of 1972 was my first air date on the air as Dynamite Jim Green.
Well, Dynamite Jim Green, I remember when I asked you to do this show, the first thing I said to you was, we're gonna talk about the importance of radio and your health. And you looked at me and you said, oh, well, okay, I'll do it, but I don't see the relationship. I'm not sure we could really do this, tie it into someone's physical health. But you already mentioned this feeling that you had when you walked into that studio to be interviewed for a Boy Scout project or something like that with the radio as the content area that the boys would participate in. So that feeling that you had when you walked in, did you realize that was huge in connecting your psychological health and your physical health at that time? I know now you're older and you're much wiser, and you know that if someone...
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. When I walked in there, I knew this was something I wanted to do. I knew it right away, and I'll tell you how I knew. I was in St. John's University, and I always wanted to be a pharmacist. One of the things I didn't have in high school was chemistry. I never took it. They never required it. And in order for me to get into the pharmacy program, this was in 1969, you had to have chemistry. So that means I would have to go back to high school, learn it. So I had to make a decision. The program was called Communication Arts. It was the very first program that St. John's University had in communication arts. Other colleges had it, but they put it into their program. And so I made that decision to sign up for it at that point. And so the radio bug was in me since the time I was 5. I guess one of the premier DJs that I grew up with, my dad recorded on a reel-to-reel tape recorder, was a guy called Martin Block. And if we asked Michael Anthony that, he would know right away who he is. Michael Anthony is the host of our Unforgettable show here. So Martin Block was the first DJ I ever heard. In those days, DJs didn't talk up songs. You hear a DJ today talking a song up, they would just, introduce the song clean and then play it. And then we got into people like Dan Ingram in the 60s, Cousin Brucey, who's still around at 81 years old. And, that took off for me back in the 60s. So instead of playing stickball on the stoop, I was laughed at by all the kids. My health was in radio. From the time I was 5, I dreamed about it day in and day out.
It's funny because here at WHPC, now I probably those little tape recordings I made on my little tape deck, singing with my sister to songs on the radio probably was my epiphany that I would end up here eventually. But this was in no way a plan for me. And yet I can't imagine my career, especially as a nurse, without this piece. Do you feel that way as well? And do you see your colleagues here? I mean, they are so involved in the music they play, and you support them in developing that energy that you have for music. Do you see that as part of why 90.3 WHPC is so successful as a college radio station?
There's two takes on that. Let me say this. In the 1970s and 80s, most college radio stations were looked at as
education, right?
Just boring radio people, a bunch of, if you want to say, kids, getting on a microphone screaming. And college radio wasn't that important. When I came here in 1973, it was laughed upon. Also, fast forwarding a minute, we don't have the technology we have today.
I know, it's amazing, isn't it?
MP3 files. We didn't even have cassettes in those days. We were still using reel-to-reels up until 1996. No, I guess it was 92. We switched to Pro Tools, which was a way of recording on the computer. So here's what happened. Around 1999, I had listening into terrestrial radio. I was sick of hearing the same 200 songs on some of the commercial stations. They had rotations of 2,000 songs. They were down to 200 songs. And you heard them over and over again. And I said to my wife one day, I said, you know what? SiriusXM radio has come out. I need a radio I had a Toyota Sienna then. So they gave me the radio for my birthday. It's about $500. Greatest $500 I ever put in. It was in 2001. No, before that, 1999, I think I put it in. And here's what's happened to college radio. With formats getting more proliferated with hip-hop.
Yeah.
And, with formats dropping a lot of songs off their roster of playlists in terrestrial radio, the educational stations came into their own. Because when you come to WHPC, you're getting something you don't hear anywhere else. So if you turn on the Oldies show with Steve Dassa, we use him for an example, you're going to hear songs that you heard that were in the top 35 that necessarily were not in the top 10. But yet we heard the song and we remember it. On the terrestrial stations, you're only hearing the top 30, top 40 over and over and over again. So when you came to us I would say it was about 1990, educational stations became more of people that did not want Sirius. They don't want to spend the money for it. They don't want it. They want to get radio for free. Then we'll come to this station or another college radio station that they like for a program and they like. So that's how it really evolved.
You know what? I don't like Sirius radio. You know that?
No.
I don't. I like to play the knob, but this is the perfect time for a break. You've been listening to Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. This is Joan Buckley, and we're going to continue talking with Mr. James Green about radio and your health after the short break.
When Dad needed help getting around, I became his driver. Any daughter would do the same. But soon enough, he needed help doing more things, and it was up to me to be his personal shopper and financial manager, too. And before I knew it, Dad moved in with me. So I became his cook, his personal assistant, his physical therapist, and even his nurse. When I started taking care of Dad, I didn't realize all the roles I'd have to play. But no matter what, I know I'm still his daughter.
We understand the many roles you play. And to help, we created an online caregiving resource center. At aarp.org/caregiving, you can find resources and connect with the caregiving community. Together, we can better care for ourselves and the ones we love. Visit aarp.org/caregiving to learn more. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
WHPC. Welcome back to Your Family's Health. This is Joan Buckley, and we want to welcome back our guest, James Green. Now, Jim, before we left on break, we were starting